Why did you fail your first driving test? I was approaching a four-way stop and stopped appropriately. The tester was writing and not paying attention to the situation. As I was about to let off the gas, a car approached from the right and looked like they were gonna run the stop sign. They stopped at the last second and my tester told me that I had the right of way. They then guided me back to the testing center and said because he told me about the right of way. I failed. I tried explaining, but being 16, I didn't have the confidence to say I didn't do anything wrong and they weren't paying attention. I passed the next time around. I almost failed because of parallel parking, or mainly my anxiety. I practiced it a million times and not once did I ever hit the curb. I got it down perfectly every single time during lessons and out practicing. The day of the test, I got too nervous, I'm not good under pressure, and hit the curb. Got an understanding proctor who could feel my anxiety, or the fact that I was a 24-year-old woman with a young male testing me. And he said I'm going to pretend that didn't happen and let me redo it. I got it right the second time and passed. For context, I didn't take driver's ed because I didn't want to pay for it. I waited until I was 18 and studied for the exam. I had a perfect written test. I failed my first driving test. I can't remember the exact reason, but I do remember the instructor saying I must have picked up bad habits from my parents because I didn't take driver's ed. The second time I took the driving test, I got the exact same score and passed because I had a different instructor. The county I grew up in notoriously fails students who don't take driver's ed on the first test. It was incredibly frustrating. It was in the middle of a Canadian winter, and I was doing my tests in a residential-ish area that had no sidewalks. He wrote, so I dropped my speed 5 below the speed limit while passing these kids, and the driving instructor yelled at me that I was going too slow and that it was dangerous, so I didn't pass the test. He also said I didn't check my blind spot, but he obviously didn't see that I did because he was actively looking at his phone and not at what I was doing. I was coming out of a side road, but there was a van parked right on the corner. I couldn't see a thing to my right. It was clear to my left. I ever slowly crept forward, leaning to see around the van the best I could. The assessor slammed the brakes and said no. Shui have no idea what he wanted me to do in that situation. The only safe option I could see was to just wait for the van to leave, but it was parked so it literally could have been there for days. In the debrief, he just told me I couldn't see to the right, so it wasn't safe to proceed at all. At the beginning of the tests, we were pulling out of a parking garage that had terrible blind spots. I made a comment there should really be a stop sign here. This could be bad. Almost came to a complete stop and pulled out. Finished my driving test feeling great because it all went well. We parked and I asked how I did. Instructor, do you remember the spot that you said there should be a stop sign? There is. For some reason it's 15 feet up on the concrete pillar rather than at normal height. So I have to fail you because you ran a stop sign. Mum was to take me to the test. I had passed the written part with ease. So Mom gets my sister, who was 12 at the time, in the back seat and off we go. We get there and when it was my turn, Mum pulls up into the spot. The testing guy comes over, checks Mum's license, checks my permit which you get so you can practice with an adult in the car, and then tells everyone to get out of the car. My little sister goes no. Mum tells her to get out of the car. Debbie repeats no. The tester immediately fails me at that moment. So dumb. Took it in a tiny-ass town at 8 a.m. Only cars in the parking lot of the place was the car I got there in, the car of the other person taking their driver's test, and the 2 cars of the 2 driving instructors. 4 cars total in the parking lot including mine. I failed for observations in the parking lot, as in I did not look around enough in the parking lot before pulling out to make sure nobody was going to hit me, or I wasn't going to hit anyone else. There was nobody freaking there, and he even said the rest of the test I did perfectly. Didn't look both ways long enough and pulling out of the DNV parking lot onto a one-way street. Piece of shit tester, honestly. So quite crap, like stopping distance behind vehicle at a light. Didn't immediately swerve merge to the right lane after turning left at that light, and shifted manual when crossing imaginary train tracks. That evaluator was super nice though. Really enjoyed chatting with her during that drive, which I think was her trying to distract me, but whatever. Me, speeding, and I didn't speed to keep them from hitting me. And the instructor said that I should have known that they were coming around the blind corner faster than road speeds and waited longer. I'm still a little salty about it. But I passed the next test and have been driving for years. I'm now the person who waits long at stops to make sure it's all clear. And that is the reason. I was on a 3-lane street, and they wanted me to cross over 2 lanes. I looked back, saw no one was behind me in any lane, and I crossed 1 lane, paused and crossed the next lane. I was supposed to check, cross, then check again, then cross again, which does make sense in a high traffic area. For sure. Totally valid reason to fail. But that one part of me resentfully thought, there was literally no one else on the entire street in visible distance, and that won't change in the time it takes for me to move over. Didn't stop long enough at the stop sign. I counted to 10 like I was told, and the instructor said I didn't wait long enough. Through where there was incoming traffic doesn't stop, no one was there, so I kept going. And as I got maybe halfway through, a car turned in from the main road, and the instructor said I should have waited for the car that wasn't there when I pulled out. I wasn't arguing though. I assumed I was wrong. Now I'm not so sure. I didn't. Both times, USA and UK. Went to the DMV near Northridge in the San Fernando Valley. Was driving a Chevy Monte Carlo. The examiner got me to pull out of the parking lot, turned right 4 times and back into the parking lot. At one point he said, between now and the next intersection, I'd like you to change lanes 4 times. Next intersection was about 500 yards ahead. When we got back to the DMV, he told my father that I drive like a maniac and gave me my pass. This was 1981. A group of boys were constantly laughing and making fun of me because, oh, look funny a girl is driving and she will obviously fail. I did not bother with them much, but when it was my turn, I blacked out for 10-15 seconds. I can't remember what happened, though their mocking faces were constantly flashing in my mind. One of my trainers was also making misogynistic jokes while we were waiting. I failed. I had passed 2 practice tests consistently 2 hours before the final one. The DMV location I took my driver's test, it required you to back up alongside a curb, and if you hit the curb, it was an instant fail. We weren't supposed to use the side mirror either. We had to look back over our shoulder. So yeah, I touched the curb on my first try. On my second try, I went much slower backing when backing up and tried even harder to keep the steering wheel straight, or at least pull away from the curb instead of towards it. Lol. It was an easy pass after that. There was one examiner at our DMV that failed everyone first time. If you didn't do enough wrong to fail on your own, she would make something up. The official reason listed was I failed to yield at a 4-way intersection. However, the 2 roads that she wrote as the crossroads never meet. They run parallel to each other. Scheduled another test for a month later. Second test was only half as long when passed. She just wanted people to have more practice or something, I guess. Hit the curb when pulling over to the side. Instant fail, the second time. The instructor made me do everything. Parallel parking. Uphill, downhill. Pretty much everything else too, and I nailed all of it. Then the fucker said I ran a stop sign in the parking lot of the facility after the test, and he failed me. I never saw a stop sign, and I still use that facility now. I look out for that stop sign every time. And I still don't know what the hell he was talking about. Instead of having one big school zone for the public middle school and the Catholic school diagonally across the street, they break it up. Cops don't care if you're ever so slightly over in one of the zones. BC, you need to slow down anyway for a light, but the BMV cares a lot. It panned up BC. My parallel parking was perfection on that first test, and she said she was giving me my score for that one on my second. I technically was over a little far on the second. Inspector told me to drive to my parents' home, a road well known. And exactly that was the problem. I approached an intersection where traffic from the right had priority and visibility was low. Say I knew the chance was low someone would cone out on that moment. I approached the intersection slowly in second gear. Gas pedal loose. 1 foot on the brake and the other one on the clutch for just in case. They failed me for this. I had to switch back to first gear. I didn't make enough of a spectacle of looking over my shoulder when asked to do the 3-point turn. When I took it a second time, the lady was in a horrible mood and screamed at me 30 seconds into the test, then made me turn around and end the test in under 2 minutes. I didn't even get to do anything. Couldn't appeal it or anything. Third lady saw I was a nervous wreck and crying, so she told me to take deep breaths, and it calmed me down enough to pass. I was so nervous that the dysregulation overrode my ability to think logically, as happens when you're dysregulated, and I pulled out onto a roundabout and there was a car coming. The instructor had to brake. We were like 30 seconds into the test. Had to do the whole thing per the rules, and knowing that I'd failed, I did a perfect job after that. He said had that not happened, I'd have passed because the rest of the trip was fine. The task was to turn left at a certain mark on the street. I was one of the last people to take the test. The mark was barely visible anymore, so I missed it. Nearby was a cop who was looking if we all did it right. He started to scream at me. I talked back, so that insecure moron made sure I would fail the test. I was shamed in front of everyone, but still got the allowance to ride my bike that day. PTW, I was 7 at the time. Lol. Someone had parked at a corner on the testing course. Assessor told me to take a right, meaning I had no choice but to turn into the far lane. I was failed for making an illegal turn despite acing the rest of the test. Wonder if it was some sort of test to see if I would question him on his request to have me make an illegal turn, which is kinda shady to do to a kid after being told to do everything the assessor says.